So, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Michaela Jill Murphy. That's my actual birth name. I changed my name to Jessie Flower when I was 6 because for some reason people had a very hard time pronouncing Michaela. I don't know why, but it was butchered constantly, and I just was like, you know what? I'm going to give myself a cool name. So I became Jessie. The flower thing, I don't know. My mother was like, you have to have a last name. It's like, well, Jessie Murphy, that doesn't sound cool. I have to give myself something interesting. So there you have it. But yes, that's the two name, short story of why there are two names. Once I turned 18, I went back to Michaela Jill Murphy because more people started being able to pronounce it, and I actually like my name. So there you go. Uh, and yeah, I am from Los Angeles. I can go into a bit more detail, but I was born in Southern Indiana, grew up here in LA, and I'm back now. And yeah, I got started acting when I was about 5. I got into voice acting when I was about 8. I took a brief pause just to go into academic mode. I thought I was going to be a heart surgeon. So in high school, I was hardcore math and science. Thought I was going to go to UPenn, and then thought I was going to go to med school and become a cardiovascular surgeon. Lots of things have changed since, 10-year-old me was like, yeah, that's going to be my future. So I'm sure we will get into more details, but I am now back in Los Angeles after being in New York for a few years and then living in my boyfriend's parents' basement in Virginia during COVID, which is all a thrill. And yeah, kind of took that as a cue to come back to Los Angeles. I wanted to get back into kind of on-screen work, and it's always nice to be back in the sun. So yeah, that's a quick little overview, I guess, of just my timeline and me. And yeah, thank you for having me, and excited to talk about acting and Avatar and answer some questions. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, we definitely have a big crowd here. It's really exciting. So we're gonna start off with just like some preset questions we made up before the event that some people had, and then probably like at 7:30, 7:40, we'll leave the floor open, for people to ask questions themselves, whether in person or through the chat. Okay, so the first question, oops, was you all touched upon this already, but like what led you to start voice acting, and maybe like what is something surprising not a lot of people know about being a voice actress?
Sure. So funnily enough, I actually got started in voice acting because I was going through kind of an awkward growing phase. I had chopped off all my hair, a bunch of teeth had fallen out, and I was just in kind of a little transition growing moment. And I was doing a lot of commercial work up to that point. And then they were like, all right, well, she's not booking quite as much. And my agent was like, hey, there's this new, sector at the agency. It's voice acting. Why don't you come try it? Because you're not on screen and you might, do some work in the interim. And first of all, voice acting is pretty new as like an industry, and voice acting as a child is new as an industry, and just acting as a child in general is pretty new. Aside from Shirley Temple, I would say that like Hilary Duff, hopefully you all know who that is. There's going to be a certain point where people don't, and I'm going to cry when that day happens. But she was the first kind of actress to be like the multi-hyphenate, Disney kid, right? She had an album, multiple, and went on tours and had her own fashion line and was on a TV show. Like she had all of these boxes of like kid success, and was relatively normal, right? She didn't like tailspin off into madness. So before that, kids working behind the scenes, on set, on camera, whatever, was very hit or miss because people were like, if we can hire somebody who's 18 or above to do this, we're gonna do that, because then we don't have to worry about school. We don't have to worry quite as much about union rules and time on set, all that. So they kind of started expanding working with kids in voiceover. Why? Not sure. Maybe there was just a higher rate of authenticity. It was exciting to see what kids came up with because, if you have a 6-year-old in a room, who knows? Who knows what's going to come out of their mouth? So it's exciting. So that's how I got started, because I was already working in commercial work. And I just wasn't booking as often. So, funnily enough, my first voiceover gig was actually Finding Nemo. And I was the voice of all the little, school fish and the little turtles. It was me and like 10 other kids, and we would do a thing called a donut in the recording studio, which is where you would just get in a circle and just walk around for like, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And every time you would start approaching the microphone, you would pick up a fake conversation either with the person like next to you, or just be curious in something that might be in the scene. So if, you were coming around, you just be like, ooh, look at that coral, that's so cute. Like, let's go and look at, whatever, something like that. And then when you passed the microphone, you would hush and you would stay out quiet as you like went back around. And then once you started approaching again, you would start up a different strain of conversation. And then they would take all of that and layer it into the school scenes and the turtle scenes. So yeah, that was my first voiceover gig. I did not meet Ellen DeGeneres, did not meet Nemo, did not meet anybody. None of the big names were there that day. But yeah, it was so much fun and it was so relaxed. I think two, you kind of mentioned a surprising thing. One, you realize how much water you need as a human being. Might need to refill this during this little conversation we're having. And I quickly found that out. I was like, I can't speak anymore because I just had been talking for an hour straight. And also that it actually almost takes more acting than stage or screen, just because you have to emote every intention, every like subtext clue into only your voice. You don't have your body or your facial expressions to help you with that. That's kind of up to the animators. So I've really been discovering that more so in the last few years, because as I've gotten into more adult characters, I realized that I'm so used to playing with kid sounds and kid energy, and I'm having like a weird time transitioning that into adult energy, because a 30-year-old woman in a video game isn't going to have the same energy as a 12-year-old girl in a Disney movie, obviously, but I'm used to that 12-year-old girl energy because I did so much of it. So I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to be boring, but I need to make sure to infuse more into this because she can't just sound flat. So I think that the level of acting that you have to convey through just your voice is harder than some people think. And I'm not saying like, oh, this is the hardest job in the world and it's only a few can do it. By no means am I saying that at all. It just is kind of a surprise, especially if you're used to being in an improv class, or you took a commercial audition course, or you're just used to jumping in front of your camera for YouTube. And then you get into a recording booth, you're like, I feel like I sounded more like this whenever you listen to it back. And you're like, how come I felt like I was emoting this, but it didn't come across that way? And it's probably because your face might have been, but your voice wasn't necessarily carrying it as much. So I would say those are the surprising things, I suppose. But yeah, that's how I got started in voice acting. And those are probably the two biggest, I guess, surprises, quote unquote, that I've discovered along the way.
Very, very cool. So the next question we have is like, what has been your favorite project that you've worked on in your career?
Goodness. I like a lot of different things. First of all, I actually got started in acting doing musical theater, as many of us do. And yeah, so I've got a lot of on-screen, a lot of theater, a lot of voiceover. I was in a musical called Wild Party by Andrew Lippa my senior year in college, and I got to play Kate, who was originated by Idina Menzel. So anytime you get to play a role that was originally by Idina Menzel, it's very exciting. And that probably was one of the performance highlights, just because it was such a long rehearsal process. And then once you get to show week, it's just a level of elation that is really unparalleled in one sense. I guess in a weird way, the nice thing about live performance is that it only happens once every single time. Like, it's never going to happen that exact same way again. And when you're in a recording studio or on set, you usually do a couple takes, unless it's like a scene that costs like $1 million to set up and do, then you get one take. But most times you probably have a safety. And so there's always that little like comfort in a sense. It's not quite as, I don't know, dangerous is like a heavy term, but I guess is exciting because every time you see a show, that is the only version of that show that exists technically. And there's something just kind of magical about that. So I know that it's not, Nickelodeon, it's not Disney, it's not been necessarily viewed by millions of people, but that it just was such great energy. I felt so healthy, so strong, and so powerful that entire week, as I usually do when I'm in shows. But it was great because it was senior year and I was finally like a lead. And yeah, so that was probably my favorite role as far as just my own personal fulfillment, I have to say. So yeah.
All right. The next question is like, who would be your dream actor or actress that you would like to work with?
Any of them. I probably, as far as working with, I guess, I'll say this. Okay. So I use Margot Robbie as close inspiration because I feel she has a similar vibe to me and what I like to do, and also what she likes to create and how she's creating it. So I have a little pipe dream, who knows if it will happen, of pitching a couple scripts to her at some point, because she created her entertainment, production company, to focus on female voices a lot recently, similar to kind of Reese Witherspoon's trajectory as well. But she really kind of goes out of her way to find unpublished, undistributed scripts that were written by ladies and feature ladies. And yeah, I just think that that's really cool. I think that she also toes the line between kind of Hollywood glam and then just like completely, all, as we all know, Harley Quinn, of course. But her performance in I, Tonya, just kind of these gritty undertow characters that really fulfill also the glam sides, the Wolf of Wall Street sides of characters as well. So I really appreciate her as a performer. I also think that those types of roles would be kind of up my alley. Although I'm not too, I don't think I could replace her, and I don't think that she could replace me either, which is why I look up to her. Because if I was like, oh, if I'm just trying to be Margot Robbie, that's not going to work. However, I think that I'm a slightly more like girl next door / country version of Margot Robbie. So yes, I really look up to her, and I would like to work with her as like a partner in the future. That would be great. On screen, oh, man, I don't know, Tom Cruise. And Dante Bosco, because we were in the booth and I was like, hey, maybe we should, can we be in a film together? Because he's a hoot. Yeah, so all of them. There's not a particular on-screen one that's like really above the rest at this point.
Yeah. Okay, so we do have a lot of Avatar fans here. So I'm sure they want to know, like, what was your favorite part about being a part of Avatar?
A favorite part, good heavens. Honestly, at this point, this whole last year, because I'm finally like an adult, and everybody at the time when I was recording and when Zach was recording, we were 12 and 13, and everybody else was over 18 and like going to clubs in LA and like being cool. And we were like, okay, I have to go to school tomorrow, have a history test at 9 a.m. So the coolest part has probably been that I'm finally older, and I got to reconnect with a bunch of castmates the last couple of years. And that started happening before COVID happened, but it just kind of locked it all into place this last year because we were online so much. But yeah, I really connected with Olivia Hack, who voices Ty Lee, and Dante, who voices Zuko, and Jack, who voices Sokka. And sometimes I call him Sokka, who voices Jack, because honestly, the two are interchangeable. And so, yeah, that's probably been my favorite part, because now I can actually appreciate everybody as a whole person and see them for more than like 20 minutes on a Tuesday in a booth. So as far as the actual recording process goes, though, there's something that's really just cool about walking into Nickelodeon studios and having somebody like waiting for you to like record there. It was kind of exciting every single time I walked in. And the highlight was that there was a kitchen right next to the studio that we used. And sometimes there would be popcorn and sometimes there wouldn't be. It was like a 50-50 chance. But usually right when you walked in, you'd be smacked with like the smell of butter and like warm popping corn. And so anytime I walked through the doors and I smelled that, it was like an extra good day because I walked right into the studio with just like a bag full of popcorn and I was like ready to record. So that is very small and not really show related, but that probably was one of the highlights. And aside from that, I was often alone in the booth. I sometimes got to record with Gray or with Dante or with May, but a lot of times I was by myself, probably because of scheduling, because I had school to work around and everybody else had adult schedules. So I don't know, it was great working with Andrea, sorry, that didn't come out fully. She was always super just precise. She was very articulate with exactly what she wanted and communicating it to 13-year-old me so that I understood what the heck she wanted. And we would get so many things so quickly. We'd have a whole episode to do and we'd be done in 20 minutes. That's great. That's what you want. And, sometimes they have it slated for like 2 hours on the calendar and you're done in 30. So we always love when those moments happen. Yeah, there's not like a single moment, but I would say the last year has probably been the most enjoyable as far as just appreciating the rest of my cast members goes, for sure, because I didn't get to see them that much while we were recording.
It makes sense. I do want to quickly reference a question that was asked in the chat. You can still ask questions, put questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A portion at 7:35 around. So yeah, but you can still send in questions through the chat. All right. So the next question was like, Avatar, of course, has had like such a long-lasting popularity, and like a lot of people grew up watching the show. So why do you think it's had such a long like longevity among teenagers now?
Well, first of all, Mike and Brian are wonderful. Their plot, of course, and their dialogue infused to that, and the fact that they had such a set story time. It was very much, once we got to the end of season 3, same as now, honestly, everybody was like, okay, season 4, we love it so much. You have to make a season 4. You have to do this. And they're like, we don't have to do anything. It's 3 seasons. That's the story we wanted to tell. Here's the story. And I think having that backbone in a creative industry is wildly difficult. But when you have something great, you stick to it and you don't change it. And they didn't. And that's why it's so powerful. Because I'm not saying like the people who go on to make 20 seasons are bad. Great, by all means. But they had a vision in mind beforehand and they didn't alter that just because people liked it. So I think that is what's kept the kind of original nugget so strong. And then of course they have so many ideas and they went on to make Korra and now they have Avatar Studios and they're probably going to make a bunch of other cool stuff. But what's great is that they created that platform of just such solid respect of like, this is what we wanted to share. So we shared it with you. So great that you love it. Rewatch it. Like that's what the story is. And I think it is such a, I don't know how to like phrase this exactly, but it's a fine line between being, light cartoon fun, like you can put it on Saturday morning. Meanwhile, every conversation is actually wildly meaningful and can apply to multiple scenarios, multiple ages, different backgrounds. And so it kind of is this beautiful mesh of anybody can watch it. You can also watch it in the morning. You can watch it at night. You can watch it seriously. You can watch it casually. You can kind of put it on whenever, and it will match the mood. And that's very hard to do because usually things can be amazing, but it's like, oh, that's too heavy for tonight. I want to wait to another night. Or like, oh yeah, that's like fun. Let's like watch that, Sunday, like when we're off of work. Like you can watch Avatar anytime and it works. And that's kind of all due to Mike and Brian. So I think that's probably why. And I think it helps that obviously Netflix took it or bought it, whatever, this last May. That obviously helps with just new viewers or people who are like, oh yeah, I saw that like 5 years ago when I was scrolling through on TV and I never watched it. Now I can. So it helps like reach new audiences, but it also helps kind of remind people like, oh yeah, I loved that show, and they watched it again with their kids. Like that's the coolest thing. There are people who are in their 30s and they're like, oh yeah, I watched this in like college or at the end of high school, and like my kids just watched it and they loved it, so now we all watch together and we all love it. And I'm like, that's so cool. So yeah, and thankfully a lot of the voice actors are still around and working, and like to talk about their work on the show and all the other shows that they've done, because there are some insanely talented people in this cast. So yeah, that's why it's probably going to live forever.
For sure. The next question we did have also was like, do you have like a specific experience, a story that like kind of stood out and stayed with you while you were playing the voice of Toph?
Story like from recording or just from like an episode or in general? What do you?
In general, anything that stood out to you?
Well, it's funny because I shared this a little while ago, but there were 2 interviews that happened, I think, during my time recording. And it's always funny going back to your, 12-year-old self, basically. And I think I said, hold on, because I just shared this. So yes, right. 2007 interview with Nickelodeon Magazine, TBT, about season 3. And so, yeah, at the time, I was definitely a tomboy. I still am, but just also like fashion, and finally figured out how to like integrate that into my life, and just didn't know how to do that at the time. So it was fun because I did feel pretty connected to her, as just people are like, oh, like what'd you do to get into character? Like, did you have to change your voice? And I was like, I was pretty sassy already, had a lot of strong opinions. You can ask my mother. And I was usually running around barefoot in the backyard anyway. And I have, I'm not by any means claiming to have the struggles associated with being blind, but I had horrible eyesight. And there were multiple times when people would try to talk to me and I didn't have my contacts in yet, or I didn't have my glasses on. And I'd be like, I can't, what are you, I don't know what you're showing me. It's like, I can't see. So there were multiple parallels that came up in the script that just were fueled by personal experience. There wasn't too much getting into character aside from the sitting on the tougher side. I think I had a little bit more of a sensitive romantic side than Toph may have shown in the series. And so I kind of turned that part off in my head and focused in on the stubborn tomboy part for sure. And so one of the questions from this interview was, how are you like Toph? And my answer, 2007, was, I'm definitely not a girly girl, that's for sure. I like roughing around in the mud and climbing trees and stuff like that. And I was like, great. See, this is what I'm going to show people who are curious about, me as a person getting into character for Toph. So yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of, I guess at the time and now, just questioning about like what I had to do to my voice or how I like got into the character mentally. And yeah, it was pretty easy, I would say, for me to kind of relate to her. So yeah.
Got it. Great. It looks like we actually like went through all the questions that we've had like prepared.
Cool.
So now I just want to remind everyone that we will have like a Kahoot trivia after the event. We're giving out prizes to the like top 3 winners, and then also we'll have like a raffle for a big bundle prize. Both people joining us virtually as well as in person are eligible for those. For like the big bundle prize, if you're on Zoom, just have your net ID sent through the chat. And then for those in person, there will be like a paper and pen for you to write down your net ID, and then we'll have do like a raffle style to see who wins. But yeah, so now we will go into like the Q&A portion. So we'll just go one by one, like the chat can ask a question, and then as well people in person. So we'll start out with the chat. I believe the first question that came in was, okay, so what Avatar episode did you enjoy voicing the most?
Okay. And I see a question above that one in my chat, but I'm not sure if that's for everybody as well. So let's see. I probably, Ooh, I actually, I haven't had this specific question in a while. So the first, I mean, obviously the Blind Bandit was super fun. That was my audition episode. And that was the first episode that I actually fully recorded, so that was obviously very exciting. I think once we got into season 3, it was neat because everybody grew up a little bit. Season 2, everybody was still figuring out who they were and how they got along with each other and what we were doing. But once we got to season 3, everybody was kind of set. We kind of knew what our mission was. We knew where everybody stood and how to get along for the most part. And Ember Island Players was really, really fun because it was after just like a series of just mission-based episodes, something that was a little lighter, and you got to kind of relive the whole series through a weird Fire Nation lens. And kind of watch these fun caricature versions of everybody play on the screen. And it was, I don't know, it was like a refreshing breath of just air in the middle of an intense lead up to the finale. Yeah, and I mean, it was nice because this is very, I guess, stereotypical of me, but the last episode was amazing. They tried to get as many people in the room as possible towards the end so that there was that kind of just energy in the recording booth. And I believe there were like 7 microphones in the booth. So we, one day had a full house across the board. We had Greg Baldwin and Jack, May, Dante, myself, Gray. And then I think I'm not exactly sure who else we had, but it was just packed. And so it was great because we got to go through just pages without stopping and just go off of each other and like see the other person kind of actually speaking the line like at you, and then hear, it was just really cool to have it in real time because that doesn't happen most of the time when you're dealing with voiceover. So it was finally like it kind of came to life in the booth a little bit. And there's just something really cool about that. It's finally breathing real human life into what's playing on the screen in front of you. And most of the time they did have some of the animation already done. So we kind of got to see what was going on the screen, hear each other in real time. Yeah, it was magical. So that was probably the best because we all got to be together, which was really cool.
Nice. Okay, the question was if it's harder to do your Toph voice now that you're older.
I mean, yes, it is harder. I still can technically do it. I figured I was going to show you at some point. But yeah, I think it's funny because people either hear me talk and they're like, oh yeah, that's just like an older Toph. Or they're like, I can't hear it at all. It's very interesting, like the takeaways that people's perceptions, I guess, just are with my voice now. And so typically, depends on the day and how early I wake up, but I just have to kind of go to a higher range. And usually if I just say one line from the show, I can kind of get back into it. So like, look, there it is. That's what it'll sound like when one of you spots it, and I just kind of get back into her headspace a little bit. Yeah, she's, higher up. She's a little, I would say a little nasally, just like an eensy bit up here. And then aside from that, just anything that has, a little bit more energy, just make sure that it's tough and it sits kind of in the back of her throat. I don't know how to explain this fully, but yes, it's still in there. It does not happen just like naturally. I don't roll out of bed and just sound like Toph. But it, after a couple lines, and usually if I've had like a cup of water and it's not like 6 a.m. and I'm not sounding like a little frog, then I can do the higher voice. So yeah, definitely, harder than when I was 13, but not impossible. I do it for cameos like all the time. So she's in there still.
Cool. Yeah, everybody loved hearing that.
Oh, good. I'll do more lines, I'm sure, over the course of this. I saw a question that said Avatar has a lot of really deep themes and addresses issues that I find still relevant in my life. Is there anything from the show that particularly resonates with you? Yes, I would say that it's kind of funny it came out on Netflix during 2020 because so many things were amplified, not saying that they weren't happening beforehand, but they were finally amplified through news, social media, across the board. There were so many things around the world and in the US that were just kind of like, what's going on? And you could usually relate it back to something happening in Avatar. So I had an interview with the Guardian in the UK, and what was it, in June or something like that, and just about how this massive need for power and this kind of dictatorship mentality of the Fire Nation can be tied to so many current, political structures and various communities around the world, and how that mentality is still unfortunately present, and just how they problem solve in the show, and what the goal is to kind of get to peace, and how Aang handles conflict, how everybody handles conflict. Honestly, Katara wants revenge, and she wants to, kill the person that killed her mom, and there's just this deep-seated like need for that, but at the end of the day, she can't. And just all of these very real but seemingly easy to consume because it's animation in one sense, problems that come up. And I think that they're dealt with in such an inspiring way in the show, something that we could all strive, especially myself, as well, with when you just have a conflict of any sort. It could just be being jealous of somebody because their hair is done really well, and you're just like, oh, it's so annoying. Their hair can do that and mine can't. Like, to, taking over an entire country, and oppressing your people. So I think that there's not particularly one, but I would say that watching it through again this last year, as an adult, a lot more things paralleled real life in a way that was kind of eye-opening. And another reason why I think it's going to last so long, because it's just so applicable. And it's kind of wild that a kids, quote unquote, kids show, which it's not, it's all ages, but technically it was geared towards children at the beginning, can get so many things right, and grown real adults just can't, it seems. So yeah, I'm definitely not going to stand up here and give you a whole list, but I feel like you could probably find a good example for any conflict that's happening in your life, in the world, back to something in the show, which is kind of neat.
That's cool. All right, so this question, they wanted to know kind of like your journey to becoming a cardiovascular surgeon, and then going to Yale, and then how that translated to you then going into voice acting.
Yes. So, yeah, the acting thing happened because I wanted to work. I'm not sure where this came from exactly, but I was like 5 years old, and I was like going into Ralph's, which is a grocery store locally here in California. And I was like, hi, hello, can I please bag groceries here? And they're like, you're young. No, you have to be at least 14. And I was like, okay, well, that's frustrating. And I just felt like I was sitting around. I wanted to do something. And I was creative, energetic. I wanted to do things. And then somebody at school was in a commercial, and I was like, oh, that seems cool. And they got to work. They got to do something as a kid beyond just going to school, going home, whatever. I probably could have focused on like learning a musical instrument and become a musical prodigy or something, but I didn't. So that's how acting kind of got started for me, because I just had this desire to kind of be out in the world and working and contributing and like doing something. And my grandfather had to go in for quadruple bypass surgery when I was like 7. And so when that happened, I was like, ooh, I'll just fix him next time, kind of was like the mentality. Or I can fix somebody else's grandfather if they, same thing happens to them. So it turned into a little track because I was pretty good at math. I liked, and didn't mind dissecting things. I'd always been curious about that, not like living things, obviously, but if something had passed, I'd be like, oh, like what happens? Like, can I open the dead bird and see if something was wrong? And my mom was like, all right, strange child. So that was just, in my mom's mind too. She was like, oh yes, doctor, good. Yes, that's smart. Go, money, do that. So she definitely supported, that idea. She wasn't saying don't do acting, but I showed an interest and she was like, sure, that'll be good for your bank account and longevity, and I won't have to worry about you. And when I got to college, so in high school, I was very, very math centered. And funnily enough, I loved biology, did not love chemistry and physics. And I probably should have, seen the rest of this coming from that alone, just because I did not click with those subjects. I don't know why. AP bio, great. Regular chemistry, nothing. So I don't know why, but yeah, biology and then math, I went, through all the calcs. They had a little multivariable class for the seniors because we were nerds and did all of the rest of the math classes that they offered. And so I was like, cool, yeah, I'm going to go into college. And I applied kind of to a bunch of different places. I was going to go to U Chicago. I ended up getting into Yale and I was like, oh, they have singing and theater. That'll be nice for extracurriculars. Haha. And so I ended up going to Yale. I don't know what happened in my brain, but I didn't even sign up for bio. I looked at it on my schedule and I was just like, I just can't. I just cannot. I can't do it. It's like, I can't do this. And, I saw my friends struggling because I've got bunches of friends who are brilliant and in med school right now in St. Louis, UCLA. And that almost confirms, I was like, yeah, you're really, I don't think I could do that. I'm going to stand over here and applaud you and visit you and come to you in 20 years. But I don't think I could have done that. And so something in me was not up for the long haul. And yeah, there's lots of debates back and forth about obviously policies and I don't know, pharmaceutical drugs and all this stuff that I personally don't even agree with. And that's up to other people to obviously make their own opinion. But I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to do well prescribing something to somebody that I personally would not take. And that's probably not going to get me very far. So there has always been kind of a balance between Western and Eastern medicine practices in just my mom and myself. And I realized that I would have to be super, super Western medicine if I was going to be a surgeon in America. Probably going to have to be doing all of the Western medicine practices. Maybe not, but I didn't go down that path. So I don't really know. That was definitely something as I kind of went along that I was like, oh, did I make the right choice? And I was like, oh, I disagree with half of that. So maybe, maybe I did do the right choice. Can't really tell you, but it was kind of recognizing that was going to be my life for, in school, basically. School was going to be my life for the next 12 years, 13 years minimum, and especially for being cardiovascular specialist in surgery, probably 15. And I was like, ooh, nah, not for me. I didn't know why 100% because I was so set for 9 years, basically. But things change. And I took a screenwriting course just because I was like, this seems interesting. My sophomore year, loved it. That ended up being my favorite part. I ended up, doing concentration in screenwriting and film. And I also did playwriting and theater. I kind of did that just because I had to pick something in theater. Honestly, a little wishy-washy. The thing that I loved about Yale the most was screenwriting in the film program. That, yeah, my favorite professors. I feel like I actually was a human being creating something interesting and different and good. Because, when you read back your work or you read through your essays or you submit something and you're like, yeah, that was great. It feels wonderful. And I didn't really feel that in a lot of the other classes that I took. So yeah, that was kind of a surprise happenstance. I was not really expecting that, especially because in high school, I thought I wasn't a good writer because I love to read, I love stories, I love creating things. But whenever I submitted an essay, I swear to the heavens, the highest B plus, no matter how hard I tried, B plus was the max. Never could get an A. And I was like, all right, I just must suck at this or something. And there were plenty of other grades below the B+. I'm just saying, regardless of how hard I tried, I could not break that, 88% basically. And I was like, what is going on? Like, is this not interest? I don't know. So I was just like, oh, I must not be a good writer then. Great. But screenwriting is different than writing. And that's why screenwriters have editors. And I'm actually good at editing as well. I realized the issue is people were trying to make me write about things that I didn't care about. And the biggest thing, my biggest weakness is that I can't do something well if I don't like it. And that's hard because there's always going to be parts of your career that you don't like. So you have to figure out how that works somehow. And so that's been like my biggest kind of trial and error from college and being in New York. Basically, what downsides of a career do I want the most? There's always going to be stuff that you're not thrilled about, but which, I guess, basket do I want to pick of things? So yeah, that was a bit of a long answer. I apologize, but hopefully that was interesting because so much goes on in kind of deciding all of this. Yeah, it sometimes just falls into your lap when you decide to take something because it looks interesting, and you click with the professor, and you click with your classmates, and it works. So yeah.
No, definitely, I think a relevant question, especially since we're all like college students trying to figure out, what we want to do.
Yeah.
Very, very
Yeah,
insightful.
it's hard. I feel for all of you, and sometimes you don't even know if any of it's worth it, and you're like, what's going on? I'm just taking this, I'm dropping this. Does this even make sense? I don't know what's going on anymore. So the fact that you're there and you're doing it and working towards something, just congratulations, keep going. Appreciate your friends, appreciate good food, and sleeping a lot is okay, because I sure did a lot of that, whether I meant to or not. And there are lots of nights where I did none of it. So it's a lot. Go easy on yourself if you're just kind of beating yourself up a lot because you're like, I keep staying up till 6, and then I'm doing my assignment from 6 to 8, and then I'm turning it in at 9, and it's crazy. So just keep taking it day by day. You've got it.
Definitely the advice we need. I know I need. All right. The third question on the chat. Pretty sure we covered the ones before. Okay. If you could become any character from Avatar or Korra, who would you be and why?
Ooh, well, so like in real life, I probably am a mix of like Toph and Ty Lee, which is funny because I did end up clicking with Olivia Hack. Not really because she is Ty Lee, but it just kind of works out that way. I really am into circus arts, actually. I do trapeze and some aerial and some lyra and some pole stuff. I just like am into that and her general energy. And she moves around a lot. I moved 24 times. I don't have the exact number, but I've moved a lot. The top of my resume is packing boxes and driving U-Haul. And so in real life, I think I would like to be Ty Lee because she's super confident in herself. I feel like she's most honestly level-headed. She's a little bit of a pushover. I'll give, grant her that in one sense, but honestly, I'm like thinking of everybody, like aside from Uncle Iroh, who is obviously just like an abyss of wisdom. Yeah, I think she's like the most mentally healthy in one sense. Like everybody else is just coming in like so many chips on so many shoulders, and she's like a little salty, but for the most part, she's like, listen, I'm just trying to have a good time, flirt with this guy over here, and like do my back handsprings, okay? Like let's have a good time. So like, who doesn't want to be around that? So I feel like being Ty Lee would be really fun in real life.
Yes. All right. I think we have the next question. So the next question is, how early or late did the directors involve you in each episode?
I got sent when we were actively swallowing water, pardon me. When we were actively recording, we got a script sent to us first before we went in to record, like I think it was like every other week. Usually a week before your session, you'd get sent the script for it. So I don't think we were really involved in creating the episode per se. There wasn't a lot of ad-libbing where it was like, okay, and then here, like, just freestyle. Give us 3 different responses that you think, you'd say here. There wasn't too much of that. It was pretty set in the script whenever we would go in. So I think they were probably, way pre-planned before we even got that script, went into that recording booth. There were obviously the fight, sequences, and if somebody fell over, if somebody hit something, all those sounds were ad-libbed. We'd give like 3 different types of sounds if it's kind of like an kind of thing, and do bunches of different variations. But aside from that, pretty set. And they pretty much already knew what they were doing way before we got into that room. So we weren't too involved, which in one sense is nice because that kind of makes it more focused. It's more pure. It's very much streamlined vision of the creators and the animators, as opposed to like a whole multiple cooks in the kitchen situation.
Yes. And then the chat, what are your thoughts on The Legend of Korra?
So I, watched it actually for the first time. I'd watched the first like 4 episodes before this last year, but when it finally went on Netflix, I was like, hey, I can join the train of everybody else watching this now too. And I've made it through season 3. I forget where I'm at in season 4. I have yet to actually finish it. I think as long as you watch it, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if you watch it as a separate show and don't think of it as like the sequel to Avatar, it's fantastic because it's a completely different tone, it's a completely different color, it's a different time, kind of a different animation style, and a lot of different parts, a lot of different things going on. So when people went into it being like, great, we get Avatar Part 2, you're not getting Avatar Part 2, you're getting Legend of Korra. So I think it's a great thing on its own, and I think that any people who are kind of upset by it were expecting some of the original stuff to be a bit more present. So I think that's the only thing that I have really noticed. And aside from that, I think it's great. I think Asami's great. If I wasn't going to be Ty Lee, I'd be her because she's cool. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because Bolin was kind of the original sketch of like what Toph was supposed to look like. She was supposed to be kind of a slightly ripped kind of teenager boy, and so sometimes people make parallels to what Bolin ended up being. So that was kind of cool because I was like, hey, you were kind of supposed to be me, but now you're you. So look at that. But yeah, I think it's a great show, and I need to finish it. I know I'm bad, but I will soon.
Waiting for the next question.
She mentioned she's a writer. What kind of things does she write?
All right, so this question, you mentioned that you were a writer. So they were just wondering, like, what kind of things do you write?
Oh, that's a fun question. Cool, thanks. I started out, because I didn't know what the heck my voice was. I started out kind of in a coming of age, kind of Ferris Bueller Day Offy type narrative, something that ended happily and was about growing up and like taking time for yourself, and like the side adventure of discovery where you were like went on a road trip for a week and found out all these things that were important to you. So that's what was coming out of my head originally. And I also have a thing for like performance history. So, like cabaret in the 20s. So diving into those like period pieces and just bringing them to life and coloring them so that we can see them now. Yeah, I'm obsessed with like Moulin Rouge. I mean, yes, as a movie, sure, but as the actual space, like in France, yeah, that style of performance and what was popular for entertainment during that time. And then also I kind of like Westerns a little bit. So I've started toying with a couple of spin-offs from some songs and just from some, you know, rags to riches type of scenarios in the South. Yeah, I don't know. And it's interesting dealing with the, I guess, presence of Netflix right now, because it's such a strong force, as is HBO Max, all these streaming services across the board, but everything's so episodic. And it's interesting because how you write for an episode as opposed to writing for a feature is very different. And, you know, Queen's Gambit technically counts as a film in one sense because it was a limited short series. And so those 8 episodes or 10, I forget exactly how many there are, but technically count as like a long film, which is interesting because I'm like, oh, there's that option too. So trying to figure out which exact medium to write for is a little bit tricky because I don't know what's best to, and that's like my current question is like, I'm not sure. Whenever I have this idea, I'm like, cool, is this a series or is this a movie? I don't know yet. So it's kind of, that's the current struggle with certain ideas that come up. Some things pop into your head, you're like, done. That's, you know, an adult comic that'd be on like Adult Swim. There could be like 10 seasons of that, no problem. And I could parallel that with like, I don't know, Bob's Burgers in the Pitch Room meets BoJack Horseman or whatever. And like, it just falls right into your head. But some things are a little bit more open. So I'm currently just trying to figure out what to do with, you know, like the Western rags to riches ideas. I'm like, I don't know, is that more of an episodic thing or is that more of a feature thing? Yeah, but there's not one style that my brain typically writes in. It's usually just idea based, whether I'm listening to a song or talking to an old married couple at a cafe, or shopping in Dior on the Champs-Elysees, pretending that I'm somebody that I'm not. So, you know, it just like comes from an idea more so than a specific style or genre, I would say. But I will say this, dialogue when you're writing a screenplay is apparently harder than it seems. And in the writing process, I discovered that I'm not, you know, a wizard at it or anything, but that it comes relatively naturally. I recognize the importance of having necessary dialogue. Obviously, you need to further a conversation in a scene, but not just putting only the information that needs to be said, or something that is empty that could be taken out, or something that sounds really rigid that when the actor reads the line, and it's probably because I've read so many scripts in my life, and you read so many ones where you're like, what is this person saying? Nobody would ever say anything like this unless they were like on something. So yeah, it's the dialogue is kind of the nugget that I've really been practicing / massaging and taking notes on. Because regardless of what you like writing or how you like writing, unless it's a silent film, the dialogue is what will carry that through. Because you can have kind of an interesting camera angle, you could have honestly not much happening in the plot, but if you're interested in that conversation, you're done. Sold. The audience will stay, the audience will listen, and they'll probably want to know more. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing that I've been, I guess, making sure is honed, polished, good every time I write something down. You know, if I were to audition with it, does it work? You know, that sort of thing.
Very, very cool. This may be our last question. What characteristics do you think you and Toph had in common?
What characteristics do I think Toph and I had in common?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Water. Let's see. I would say that we are both very stubborn. We we both think that, you know, I can do it myself. I can carry my own weight. Same. And we can't. You know, that's a lie that we like to tell ourselves because we're just so determined to like break away and be like, I can do it all by myself. I never needed any of you. Haha. And that's just, in fact, not the case. And she very much needed the gang, needed her parents, even though they didn't necessarily get along, to make her who she ended up becoming. So I would say those two things for sure. The appreciation of nature is really a thing. There's a bird clock in the background, so if you hear squawking, that's a bird clock. Appreciation for nature is a huge thing. I was such an outdoor kid. And I think that only stopped because school / auditions as an adult and working, you're just inside more because work. But I loved climbing trees. Oh my gosh. And just going on hikes, running around barefoot anytime I was allowed to. Fun story, I actually cosplayed as myself for the 2014 San Diego Comic-Con. I made my Fire Nation outfit the night before. I went to Joann's Crafts and bought 2 different types of red fabric and like sewed it together. It's actually pretty good. I must say, for a last minute throw together, pretty good. And I walked around the entire day barefoot in San Diego and nobody stopped me, and I was over the moon. They let me go into the convention outside, and they let me into a restaurant, like a convention restaurant, without shoes on. And I was like, is this legal? I don't care. So yeah, it's that was a little bit of a different thing than the nature thing. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. There's lots of parallels, honestly. I think the only major thing is that I am not a descendant of like massive wealth, with, you know, a huge, I don't know, small country as my backyard, like in the show, and that I am not, you know, of course, legally actively blind. So those would be the 2 things. And unfortunately, cannot earthbend. And yes, I have tried. Just like we have all tried with wands, and just like we have tried to fly, I tried jumping off of my roof twice. The desire is so present. It was only a 1-story roof. And everything was fine. I knew how to land. I knew how to bend my knees and roll out of it. It was okay. But it was just, yeah. So there were lots of similarities, I would say, in, you know, characteristics between us 2. I think that there's a bit more femininity just with kind of how I like to present myself, with certain, and also this is all just perception as far as like fashion and what your hair is supposed to look like and all this stuff, the norms. But I did kind of get more into that, and you know, appreciate jewelry and like outfits, you know, and changing clothes and wearing heels. And you know, I love modeling as well, which I think Toph would never in a bajillion years probably do. So yeah, that's probably like the most different thing. But yeah, the core traits are a lot of similarities between the 2 of us, I would say. And I know we're short for time. Could I don't know, do you want me to do like a rapid fire thing, or is this like a harsh deadline and I have to go?
No, yeah, we were planning to do like the raffle probably like after the trivia, which would be like 15 minutes. So yeah, I don't want to hold you, you know, any longer.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm very willing. I don't know what your whole list of like events and things to do are, but I very much can stay, and like answer a few more questions. Or if you're like, no, we have to do these other things, I also am like on Instagram / I'm also on TikTok, but Instagram is probably easier for like DM purposes, as far as like further questions if people want to ask. So up to you. If I can stay, I'd love to answer a few more, but if I have to go, I understand.
I don't know, maybe I should ask them. Like, do you want her to stay?
Okay.
I just wanted the audience, you know.
Great.
All right.
Cool. Okay, well,
Is there like a time you want me to cut you off? Like, up to you.
I'm just gonna try to like go through. I'm gonna try to go through the rest of the current ones. So
Okay.
anyone's,
Yeah, if
any
you
new
want to
ones
pick
I
and
won't
choose,
pick.
go ahead.
But if anybody then kind of in the real life audience, which I heard all of you over there and like, hello, feel free to, I guess, share them. I don't know if you were they writing them down on a piece of paper and handing them to you, or were they just asking you?
Yeah, they were just asking. We were going like.
Okay, cool. I'll go through these on the chat really quickly and then see if there are any remaining. Okay, so this is going to be rapid fire. I'm just going to try to touch on as many things as I can. What did I think of Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy? Was there a scene that stood out to you or that I'd like to recreate? I think the comics are really cool. Similar to the Korra thing, I feel like you have to really appreciate them as like a separate entity because they're created and, you know, animated, whatever, written by different people. But it's great because you get to breathe life into all these side stories that you want to see happen. I think that making Toph Beifong Metal Bending Academy a thing, very cool. You know, she ran into the music guy, the secret tunnel man in the comic. That was great because I love singing that song. I like to sing that song for cameos when it's people's like anniversary or something, even though I wasn't there for that episode, just because it's such a great song. So it was a great comic that I actually, is that the only one? No, I have 2 others. But I went into Barnes & Noble specifically to buy that one a few weeks ago because I just thought it was exciting. So I thought it was great. Toph's family in Korra. Honestly, I feel like it was pretty accurate. People are like, oh, don't you think it's interesting she became chief of police? I'm like, no, because internally, listen, who you are when you are like 10 years old is like kind of who you are forever in one sense. I'm not saying you don't learn things and like, you know, you're kind of like, oh, you know, this is how I should be a person. But your energy and how you've kind of been treated, how you communicate, and how you've been allowed to communicate affects you. And so people are like, oh, she was so against, you know, the rules and she wanted to break all of them. And I'm like, yeah, so then she gets to be in charge of making them. Doesn't that make sense? Then she is like she's the top. Then there are no other rules to break because she's the one who's making them. So lots of people didn't necessarily feel the same way, but I was like, honestly, makes sense. Also makes sense that she wasn't, quote unquote, the most empathetic mother. She was probably really intense because she didn't know how to be kind because her examples of parenting were Katara or her actual parents, which was stifling. And she didn't want to completely stifle them, but she also wasn't going to let them sit around and do nothing because she was like, I ran around and like made my own way and had a whole different persona and fought all these people. So you have to go be incredible too. You know, it's probably was a very interesting dynamic. But I thought that they were represented really well. I thought that her kids were really cool. I actually got to voice young Sulin in like a flashback scene in Korra, which was really fun, voicing my own daughter. And yeah, so I think they're really well, I guess, characterized. Favorite Toph line from the show. This goes back and forth, depends on the day, depends on my mood. You know, the look, there it is. That's what it'll be like when someone spots it. That's what it'll sound like when someone spots it. One of my favorite lines, one of my favorite episodes. Yeah, man, she's a queen of one-liners and nicknames. So like finding a one line, they all kind of just have the same punch of, you know, it's upside down, isn't it? You know, just the little things that you just get you every time. You're like, yes, it is upside down. Love you, Toph. Yeah, I would say I'm getting better at having all of her nicknames, you know, Snoozles, Sugar Queen, Twinkle Toes, Lily Liver. That's a new one from, you know, Metal Bending Academy. Yeah, her nicknames are the best. Whereas I recognize a lot in public. No one knows who the heck I am, nor do they care. I walked around, and even when I was in my costume at San Diego Comic Con, people be like, "Oh, great cosplay!" I'd be like, "Thanks!" Like walking along, it was great. You know, that's kind of a plus of being a voice actress because no one necessarily knows who you are and what you look like. Social media is changing that, obviously, which is simultaneously like a good. I don't know if it's really a bad thing, but it's cool because you finally get to put a face to the voices, and you know. It's kind of cool to like see what everybody looks like in real life. But yeah, people did not know who I was / know who I am. Has happened a couple times though. In New York, there were like 2 people. I was like walking past just like in like 34th Street, and Broadway, somewhere around there. And somebody just like walked straight past me and they're like, Jessie? And I'm like, do I know you? I was like, yes. And they're like, oh no, I just came. Actually, Dante was there like promoting his book. And he's like, I just came from Dante's signing. And like, I didn't know if like you were going to be there because I know you're in New York or whatever. And I was like, wow, you follow me on Instagram, don't you? And he was like, yes, I do. And I was like, that's so funny. And then there was one other guy who was walking on like 106th Street, and I was sitting out front of a bar, a friend of mine's bar, and he like walked past and then came back and looked at me and then like walked away and then came back. And I was like, yes. He was like, are you Michaela? And I was like, yes. Very funny in-person experiences. If you could bend an element in real life, which would it be? Probably Earth. I know that that's like a cop-out, but actually from the four, I feel like Earth is the most helpful for me and would probably be the most realistic for me to bend. I'm technically a Leo. I was born in August, whatever you want to do with that. But I think I would probably be an earthbender. I might be a firebender, but I don't think I have enough. I think I'm an earthbender. Favorite antagonists in Avatar and Legend of Korra? I mean, I guess like Zuko, not Zuko, because he turned good. Azula, gosh, she's psycho. We love her. We love watching all of her insanity. Who's favorite character besides Toph? Aside from me wanting to be Ty Lee, Uncle Iroh. You can always turn to Uncle Iroh for everything. And Appa. We literally need Appa. Everybody, nothing would happen in this show without Appa. So, which scene/episode was most difficult for you to film and why? I would say early on, it might have been actually one of my favorite episodes, the library, because that was the first episode I had to do a lot of grunting when I was, holding up the library. So whenever I kind of had to do the and stay up, like all that stuff is kind of hard on your throat when you're not used to doing it. And I was just shot. I was like, oh my gosh, my voice is so sore. And it got a little better over time, but anytime there's a high impact, fighting, bending scene, my throat was shot because I was just doing so many different intense noises that I wasn't used to doing on a daily basis. Was that your normal voice as a kid, or was it also a voice you did when you were acting as a kid? I'm assuming you mean the Toph voice. Yes and no-ish. I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I basically just took away like the nicer side, and I guess sometimes the more polished, like, okay, great, yeah, like sounds nice, professional sounding. I just turned off those switches, and it was purely instinctual and sitting more in the back of my throat, more guttural. But it was technically my normal voice in a sense. Do I ever rewatch the show? I watched it in total from like beginning to finish, probably 3 times. I would say I watched plenty of like one-off episodes here and there, like referred to scenes, but it was not easy to come by. And I actually didn't even have the DVDs forever. I think I got some this last year because I was like, I guess I should own a box set. Why not? But I just didn't really have them. And then, at the time, you couldn't just call Nickelodeon and be like, hey, can you like play season 1 this weekend on TV? Thanks. So yeah, I've only gone through it about 3 times. Where if you were asked to come back to the series with the new Avatar Studios, would you do it? I don't know. Because at the time, and Mike and Brian will say this too, they wanted to cast a lot of Asian American voice actors. And they got a good number. They got a lot of interesting people on board to be on, in the cast. But there weren't too many options. And so they kind of filled in accordingly. And obviously, I'm wildly grateful that they liked me. They thought I fit Toph's vibe. But I am Irish. I am very Caucasian. And all of these people are Chinese. Not all of them, in the original anyway. So I don't know. And I don't know if they would even ask me to come back anyway because of that. And because there's so many more options now, just across the board, online, people can send things in, in ways that just weren't physically, technologically able to in 2006. You can have somebody in London send in, a voice recording that's actually pretty good quality that they might even be able to use in the show, after spending, 20 minutes in their closet, like in between some sweaters. Like you just couldn't do that the same way with technology. So they needed somebody in person. They needed somebody there. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm not expecting anything to come. People are like, oh, like they'll invite you back as Toph. I'm like, I don't know about that. I really don't, and I'm not expecting them to, and they shouldn't need to at all. If there is anything that is like appropriate and is awesome, you know, that comes up and they're like, yeah, like we'd love to have you. Of course, I would love to work with Mike and Brian again, but I'm not expecting anything to come of it, honestly. But I will be there supporting and watching every single thing that they do, obviously. What was the most recent thing that refueled your passion for acting? Man, COVID-19. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I don't know. It's been a very, very up and down, as any probably professional creative will tell you. Weird year, just kind of across the board. I would say that watching, I mentioned this once already, but I'll mention it again. Watching The Queen's Gambit, that probably refueled a lot of it, both as a writer and as an actress. And that's probably like the strongest, most recent force. Yeah, actually, I hadn't really thought about that. So thank you for that question. But yeah, that's kind of what did it. I watched that and I was like, ooh, I want to be in that, and or I want to write something that impacts like that. So that probably refueled it. Hearing your academic/career route was very relatable as a college student. Yay! I feel like we all are in more of a similar boat than we let on sometimes. I think the comics have some events after TV series. That's about it. Yes. TV shows / anime do you enjoy? Any that you like recently? I love Kim Possible. I used to read the Sailor Moon comics just like obsessively, and I know that's basic of me because everyone's like, Sailor Moon is so commercial, but it's great, okay? And so those were two big things when I was younger. I wasn't actually allowed to watch TV really ever as a kid. I had to read things. So I didn't start watching a lot of stuff until college, and even then, I was college and life was insane. So I'm getting more into anime and I've learned a lot more. I just started going to like conventions kind of for real in like 2019, and then COVID happened. So I always walk the floor. Some people like never walk the floor, and I'm like, go walk the floor. Look at all the art and all the books and like costumes and cool things. Like what? Anyway, so yeah, I have plenty more to learn. And let's see, as far as just regular TV, aside from like Queen's Gambit, I don't know, I rewatched The Office, and you know, like started watching Criminal Minds. We all like crime shows sometimes. They're just entertaining. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's I kind of just watch any and everything. The Great British Baking Show. Anytime I have to de-stress, watch baking. What's your favorite bagel? I surprised myself the last couple of years. I actually like everything bagels now. I used to be a hardcore blueberry. Now I'm in everything. August birthdays, yay. Yes, okay. And so that's, and can you sing the Secret Tunnel song in Toph's voice? It ends up just sounding like my voice. I try to start out in Toph's voice and then I get too excited and just end up like chanting Secret Tunnel. So it's, yeah, it happens. Okay, so to leave sometime, I guess let's just wrap it up and do like 2-3 last questions from like in-person people, and then I can let you do your things.
Okay. We're just getting the question now. Like I need to have music. Right, Jeopardy. Oh, wait. Okay, the question is, what's your favorite piece? Wait, what is it again? Oh no, short memory. Okay, what's your favorite piece of advice from Uncle Iroh's wisdom?
Oh gosh. Season 1 through 3. No, I'm just kidding. Well, it's because I refer to this moment a lot because I actually think Toph and Uncle Iroh are kind of parallels in one sense. They both, in just different generations, you know, they kind of realized that they wanted to do something differently, you know, from their family's expectations, and had to kind of break away from that and just forge their own path. And both of them end up kind of being little hobbits like in the forest or like at random hot spas, you know, things like that. So I love their moment in the chase when they get to sit down and have tea for, I think literally the scene is like 2.5 minutes. It's so short, but in that amount of time, there's such like a little nugget of solace for each other. She's like, you know, your nephew's really lucky to have you, and like I'm sure you'll find him. And he's like, it's okay to let those that love you help you. And she's like, ah, crap, you know, it's just like a nice little moment. So I think that's a big one, especially as somebody who similarly likes to like do things by myself, because I can, because I'm independent and it's fine. You know, letting your friends and letting your family actually help you and being like, hi, hello, can you please do this because I need help doing it. Wildly difficult for me to do, but necessary. So I think that's huge, especially in college. Not saying that you have to burden your friends to help you with every single thing, but it's also a perfect friend for you to be like, hi, listen, I really need help with this. Can we like sit down and like talk about this? And can you like help me for an hour or something? Like huge game changer. So do that.
Hello. Do you think Zuko and Kintaro should have ended up together?
You know, Dante does sell Zutara shirts, so you know, I've been tempted to sell Taka shirts. Anyway, so I don't, I'm torn because I think that it's like a nice image and like they parallel each other so nicely and like there's chemistry and whatever. But as far as like building a family and like a healthy environment for their children, Aang is like 1,000% the better choice for that, because there's just going to be too much residual coming off of Zuko there. There's too much going on. So I think for the sake of family health and success, Aang. For the soap opera version that we all want to watch, then yes, ended up together.
Love that. I guess we'll take one last question.
Like she was a kid and they were filming. She like everything was going on.
Okay, so the question is, a lot of people when they were watching the show, they were kids, and you were like a lot younger, so like they were wondering like, did you know what was like taking place in the show as you were doing it?
So yes and no. I think partially because you're exposed to less because you've been on the earth for less time, but also because you're just focused on different things like school and getting, you know, ready for dinner or something like that. You recognize, you know, going on an adventure or being at war or being in a fight as like a concept, and you kind of understand what it means, and you understand that it's like, oh, that's, you know, not the best, or oh, somebody's in trouble, but not to like the level obviously as when you're older, just because you start to experience those things firsthand as opposed to watching them or hearing about them or reading about them. So I knew it was happening. And when you're 12, 13, you know what's up, you're intuitive, you can read a room and feel if something is like, ooh, this isn't going too well, or like, oh yeah, like this is a good thing, we finally won, whatever. Yeah, so I knew what was going on for sure. And I think so did Zach. He was in New York, voice of Aang. He funnily enough was in New York recording the whole time, so we never met him. We never saw the Avatar. He was lost until the finale viewing when he finally flew out and we all watched it together, all the cast and the crew, on a little theater on the Paramount lot, and we finally found the Avatar and got to see him in person for the first time. But even he knew, you know, what was going on. Did we understand it to the level of, you know, Grey Delisle voicing Azula at the time? No, definitely not. Totally different. She was already, I think she was actually pregnant during recording. Seeing like an Azula, a pregnant Azula, like whenever she was in the recording booth and she was like angry, pregnant Azula screaming into the mic, that was some horrifying imagery right there. I was like, oh, I do not want to be in front of that woman. I do not want to be on her bad side. So yeah, I definitely started to appreciate the concepts more as I got older and started watching, rewatching, I should say. But yeah, I mean, I definitely knew that it was, I don't know, an adult in one sense timeline. And we weren't just talking about I don't know, growing flowers the whole time. But I didn't really understand how, I guess, impactful it was until, you know, probably the last couple years when I finally got to really rewatch it straight through. Okay, well, I will toss just a couple of things out there before you go. You're going into trivia first and then doing the raffle. Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Very exciting. Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to say before you get into all the fun things, thank you for having me. And hopefully I answered, you know, most of your questions. If you have any others, or you just want to, you know, toss a comment and be like, I loved season 2, episode 5, whatever. My Instagram is at Michaela Mostly, which I guess I can put in the chat. And you can share it, I guess, in person. And feel free to DM me. If I don't get back to you like immediately, don't be like, oh, she just skipped over it and she didn't mean it. I try to get to them when I can. Sometimes I forget, but feel free to send me other questions or comments, and I very much will respond. And yeah, I wrote and directed like a small short film this last year and filmed it with a couple of friends in Vermont. So if you want to talk about film, if you want to talk about Yale, if you want to talk about Avatar, or if you just want to randomly send something, be like, look, I made shoes today, feel free. DMs are open, and I definitely am more Instagram. I did start a TikTok at the end of last year, still getting accustomed to it. And it's funny because there were like no usernames available because I was late. And so I ended up having to choose at Blind Bandit BB, like BBY, because that like was the only thing. Like even my name like wasn't really there. I was like, great, okay, so I'm just gonna go right into this. So yeah, that's open as well. I also started just because Dante had done a little bit of this, and I was like, hey, where's the Earth Kingdom rep? Started a little bit of Earth Kingdom merch and Toph inspired fun things. It's at banditbasics.com. There are t-shirts and sweatshirts and things. Yeah, just because Dante released all these cool things, and I was like, excuse me, where is the Earth Kingdom? So if you're interested, that exists too. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for hanging out. And hopefully, you know, college is going well. It's been like a weird year for virtual studying and finals and all that madness. So hopefully we're kind of nearing somewhat of the end, and you all can be together and dance around in a circle. That's not what happens in college, but whatever. And, you know, kind of feel like back to normal relatively soon. And thanks for having me, everybody.
Send along your handle.
Thank you. And I would say I have to do some boring things. I tutor children, and I have to send some homework for some ACT studying to get into college. Yay! So yeah, I'm glad I got to answer a few more questions. And thank you so much for having me. And
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
It was definitely fun, and a lot of people enjoyed it, and it was nice to see like people coming in person. It's definitely been a weird year, but this has been a great event. Thank you again, and also for staying, I know, past like 8. Thank you so much.
Of course. Oh my gosh, thank you guys for staying late. And I'm sorry if I made your event a little later, but hopefully it's not too late.
No, all good. People enjoyed it really. But yeah, once again, thank you for coming, and yeah.
Of course, thank you. Keep your knees high, twinkle toes. Bye, everyone.